next?
Just the whole back of the building just fell in on us. It's just, it was a big force.
Actually look through and see people trapped, but we can't get to them right now.
It hurts deep down as to why someone would do something of this magnitude.
What could be their motive to hurt that many innocent people?
Really like nothing I've ever seen or been prepared for, and you know.
All my friends are missing. I don't know where any of them are.
Timothy McVeigh was born on April 23, 1968, in Lockport, New York, the only son in a working-class Irish-American family. After his parents' divorce when he was 10, he was raised by his father in the quiet town of Pendleton. McVeigh was a shy, withdrawn child, teased by classmates, often lost in his imagination. From an early age, he developed a fascination with firearms and would later embrace anti-government literature and survivalist ideology. He even dabbled in amateur hacking under the alias The Wanderer, using a Commodore 64 to access government systems. Though he was voted most promising computer programmer in high school, McVeigh's grades were mediocre. After a brief stint in college and a job as an armored car guard, where he reportedly showed up wearing bandoliers, he enlisted in the U.S. Army in 1988. There, he would find the structure and purpose that he was missing from his life. He served in the Gulf War with distinction, earning a Bronze Star for his role as a Bradley gunner. But that sense of belonging eroded when he failed to make it into the Special Forces. Disillusioned, McVeigh left the Army in 1991, resentful and becoming increasingly radicalized. He wrote angry letters to newspapers and elected officials, railing against taxes, firearms restrictions, and what he saw as an oppressive state. In the Army, McVeigh met Terry Nichols, a man older, quieter, but equally disenchanted. The two bonded instantly over their shared distrust of government, interest in gun culture, and belief that America was in decline. Nichols had been born in 1955 in Lapeer, Michigan, and raised on a small farm as one of 4 children. Book smart, but socially timid, he once aspired to be a doctor, but dropped out of Central Michigan University after a single semester. He bounced between jobs, working in carpentry, insurance, farming, and relationships, eventually marrying twice and fathering 3 children. At 33, Nichols enlisted in the Army, the oldest in his platoon. Though he struggled physically, he became platoon guide and met McVeigh. They bonded quickly, later serving together in Kansas, and grew even closer afterward. While McVeigh's anger started bubbling to the top, Nichols quietly sank deeper into sovereign citizen ideology. He renounced his U.S. citizenship twice, and claimed the government had no authority over him. He refused to pay debts, renounced his driver's license, and sent bizarre legal documents to county clerks declaring himself a non-resident alien. Neighbors also recalled him experimenting with explosives on his property. The two men reconnected after the Army, selling military surplus at gun shows and occasionally living together on Nichols' brother's farm in Michigan. Their paranoia turned to planning after April 19, 1993, when federal agents stormed the Branch Davidian compound in Waco, Texas. They watched the siege end in flames on TV, side by side, and saw not law enforcement, but a massacre. This was the moment it crystallized for them. They weren't just angry anymore, they wanted retribution. McVeigh was the ideological engine, the one with a mission. Nichols, often hesitant, became his aide. The supplier, the researcher, the man in the background. He helped mix the bomb ingredients, store the chemicals, and scout potential targets. However, this wasn't a partnership of equals. McVeigh was the clear lead, and Nichols went along with everything. Together, on that day in April 1993, they began creating one of the darkest chapters of American history. The Robert Moore robbery marked a decisive escalation in the ambitions of Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols. Roger E. Moore was no stranger to either man. A fellow gun enthusiast and acquaintance from the gun show circuit, Moore had previously provided McVeigh with 9 kinestics, binary explosive devices McVeigh and Nichols tested outside Nichols' home in Harrington, Kansas. But by late 1994, Moore had become more than a supplier. He became a target. Believing Moore's home held a fortune, firearms, gold, silver, and cash, McVeigh and Nichols stormed his Arkansas residence and stole $60,000 in weapons and valuables, fleeing in Moore's own van. To deflect suspicion, McVeigh later posed as a federal agent in a letter blaming the government. However, the truth would surface soon enough when the stolen items were found in Nichols' home and a rented storage unit. The robbery wasn't personal, it was about money. McVeigh and Nichols needed funds to execute their larger vision. By then, they had already begun acquiring the components of their weapon, Ammonium nitrate fertilizer was bought in bulk, 40 50-pound bags from a Kansas agricultural co-op in September 1994, with more added in October. They told the seller it was for farming, so to not raise any questions about the large quantities they were purchasing. The materials were stored in sheds across Kansas and Arizona. At one key site, McVeigh hoarded blasting caps, shock tube spools, and Tovex, some looted from a Martin Marietta quarry. He passed on 40,000 pounds of pre-mixed ANFO, preferring to tailor his own blend. A prototype was even detonated in the desert, far from prying eyes. Michael Fortier, McVeigh's former Army roommate, and his wife Lori stood in the background of the plot. The men lived together in Kingman, Arizona, and McVeigh was best man at their wedding. Though their bond later frayed, partly due to drug use, McVeigh trusted them enough to share his plan. By October 1994, he showed them a sketch of the truck bomb he was planning. Michael Fortier helped McVeigh scout potential targets. Lori was also pulled in. She assisted McVeigh in laminating a fake driver's license, later used to rent the Ryder truck that would carry the bomb. Though the Fortiers refused to take part directly, their passive complicity and what help they did provide haunted them in the years following the attack. As the plan advanced, McVeigh searched for a target with symbolic and strategic value. They originally planned to carry out high-profile assassinations on government officials, but McVeigh wanted to send a more powerful message and decided to target a building instead. He dismissed several sites for having either too many civilians or too few federal workers. The Murrah building fit their needs, a glass facade, open lot, and a hub of federal agencies. In December 1994, he and Fortier scouted the building in person.
This collections department. I don't think anybody's here though. Oh, Kathy's here. But she probably won't turn around because she don't like to be on video. Oh, I'm sorry. Claudine's here.
I'm here too, stupid.
Oh, there's Jill's office. See, we have a nice view of the courthouse. I'm videotaping my work for my mom. Could you open that for me?
If you'll take the thing off.
Okay.
This is where I work.
Too late.
Hello.
Hi, that's our auditor.
I'm currently the neighborhood auditor. I'm here to audit Kim.
No, I don't do anything.
Yeah,
oh, wait, that's not.
No, you gotta have your pictures done.
This is
no,
Colleen.
no,
She's a loan officer.
Wait.
This is the teller line. Joe and his name, Jason, and Bobby, and Frankie's just dying over here. Okay.
Hello, here I am sitting at my desk working hard, or hardly working is what I like to call it.
The bomb's design emerged from extremist manuals and field testing. McVeigh first considered hydrazine rocket fuel, but balked at the price. He turned instead to nitromethane, a volatile racing fuel, securing 3 barrels after failed attempts at NHRA events. The final bomb would weigh roughly 7,000 pounds, a mixture of ammonium nitrate, liquid nitromethane, and Tovex, sealed into 16 55-gallon drums inside a rented Ryder truck. With the supplies acquired and a plan in place, the Oklahoma City bombing was now in motion. On April 14, 1995, Timothy McVeigh checked into the Dreamland Motel in Junction City, Kansas. The next morning, he arrived at a local Ryder rental agency and signed the papers for a 1993 Ford F-700 truck. He used the alias Robert D. Kling, inspired by Klingons of Star Trek, one of McVeigh's favorite shows. That same weekend, McVeigh and Terry Nichols drove to Oklahoma City. There, McVeigh parked a yellow 1977 Mercury Marquis several blocks from the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building to be his getaway car. He stripped its license plate and taped a handwritten note over the VIN. Not abandoned, please do not tow, will move by April 23rd, needs battery and cable. On April 17th and 18th, McVeigh and Nichols emptied their Harrington storage unit, loading the bomb into their Ryder truck. At Geary Lake State Park, they braced 13 barrels, each nearly 500 pounds, with nailed planks. McVeigh arranged them in a backward J, tamped one side with fertilizer to direct the blast, and added acetylene cylinders to intensify the fireball. The rig was fitted with a dual-fuse ignition system that snaked from the cab through fish tank tubing. Connected to high-grade blasting caps and Tovex gel, 350 pounds stolen from a quarry. The tubing was painted yellow to blend with the truck's livery. After completing assembly late on April 18th, McVeigh and Nichols parted ways. Nichols returned home. McVeigh drove the bomb-laden truck back to Junction City to rest for what would be his final night of freedom. The morning of April 19th, McVeigh rose before dawn and deviated from his initial plan to detonate at 11 a.m., opting instead for 9 a.m. He packed an envelope containing pages from the Turner Diaries, a white supremacist novel that eerily mirrored his coming act, a truck bomb attack against a federal building. He wore a black t-shirt reading, "Sic semper tyrannis," the phrase shouted by Booth after Lincoln's assassination. In his pocket, a bumper sticker falsely credited to Jefferson. "When the government fears the people, there is liberty." Beneath it, he'd scrawled, "Maybe now there will be liberty." McVeigh entered Oklahoma City at 8:50 a.m. At 8:57, the same security camera that had filmed Nichols' truck days earlier captured the Ryder truck approaching. McVeigh lit the 5-minute fuse, then 3 minutes later, a block away, he lit the 2-minute backup. He parked the truck beneath the building's daycare center, exited, locked the doors, and quickly walked away. Along the route to his getaway car, he discarded the keys. At exactly 9:02 a.m., the Ryder truck erupted into thunder. More than 4,800 pounds of explosive material detonated with a force equivalent to 5,000 pounds of TNT. The shockwave carved a crater 8 feet deep and 30 feet wide. 1/3 of the Murrah building was obliterated. Floors collapsed inward like a rotted skeleton giving way. The facade was ripped off entirely.
To the record building.
And what happened next?
Just the whole back of the building just fell in on us. It's just, it was a big force. Just all fell in. Everyone along our set of offices had back injuries, head injuries, neck, bleeding, blast. I don't know.
Get some help.
We don't know what happened.
All my friends are missing. I don't know where any of them are. Just like somebody picked up the building and slammed it back down again. Then there was smoke. People were screaming. Everybody started running.
The blast shattered glass in 258 buildings and damaged 324 structures within a 4-block radius. 86 vehicles were incinerated. The concussion was felt 55 miles away and registered as a 3.0 magnitude tremor. The bombing killed 168 people, including 19 children. McVeigh was rushing back to the gateway car when he felt the distant tremor of the blast. Less than 90 minutes later, he was pulled over I-35 by Trooper Charlie Hanger near Perry, Oklahoma, for driving without a license plate. Hanger arrested him after discovering a concealed Glock 21 and a loaded magazine under his windbreaker. At the station, officers found a business card in McVeigh's pocket, hastily hidden after his arrest. Scribbled on the back were the words, "TNT at $5 a stick, need more." This cryptic message would become one of the pivotal pieces of evidence linking him to the bombing. Meanwhile, investigators had retrieved a twisted axle from the explosion site. Its VIN led them to the Ryder agency in Junction City. With the help of the rental manager, agents produced a sketch of the man who'd rented the truck. That sketch, and McVeigh's real name, carelessly used to book his motel room, led authorities directly to him. After a gun charge hearing on April 21st, just before his release, federal agents took McVeigh into custody. He refused to answer questions without a lawyer. Outside, news helicopters hovered as a crowd gathered. McVeigh, denied a bulletproof vest, was helicoptered from Perry to Oklahoma City. Terry Nichols, tipped off that he was now a wanted man, turned himself in later that day. A search of his home uncovered blasting caps, bomb-making literature, a marked map of downtown Oklahoma City, and a copy of Hunter, another novel by William Pierce, author of The Turner Diaries. The net widened. James Nichols was arrested, though released a month later for lack of evidence. McVeigh's sister Jennifer, who had mailed him ammunition, was granted immunity in exchange for her testimony. The groundwork had been laid long before, but in those 4 days of April 1995, it all came to a terrible crescendo, meticulously planned, methodically executed, and now fully unfolding in front of the world. Moments after the blast, sirens rose over Oklahoma City. At 9:03 a.m., the first of over 1,800 calls reached 911, but many responders, firefighters, police, EMSA crews had already moved toward the smoke. Civilians too rushed in, joining strangers to pull survivors from jagged debris.
We can actually look through and see people trapped, but we can't get to them right now.
It hurts deep down as to why someone would do something of this magnitude. It's unreal.
It's really like nothing I've ever seen or been prepared for, and you know, I would have never ever expected anything of this magnitude.
Every rock I grab and throw, I'm thinking that our hand is going to reach up through that little hole and say, I'm here, but that hasn't happened so far.
What could be their motive to hurt that many innocent people?
Can't find anybody who can tell us where she went. We've checked all the hospitals. We've left her picture everywhere. But we really feel in our hearts that was her that we saw.
Are there people missing from your office?
Yeah, 26.
You don't know what's happened?
I can look at that building and imagine what's happened to them.
Within just 23 minutes, the State Emergency Operations Center was up and running, coordinating aid from state agencies and federal partners like the Air Force, Civil Air Patrol, and National Weather Service. The Oklahoma National Guard arrived within the hour, 465 members strong, to provide support and security. Amid the horror, acts of duty and defiance unfolded. Officers like Terrence Yeakey and Jim Ramsey were among the first on the scene, ignoring their own safety to reach the wounded. The EMS Command Center was activated almost immediately with a clear objective: treat and transport the injured as fast as possible, prepare for mass casualties, and manage the dead with dignity. A triage center was set up nearby where over 200 patients were rushed from there to nearby hospitals in the first few hours alone. St. Anthony's Hospital treated 153 people that day. Others were sent to Presbyterian University and Children's Hospitals. Temporary silences swept the site as rescuers used listening devices to detect faint heartbeats beneath the rubble. In some cases, trapped limbs had to be amputated without anesthetic to free survivors. Multiple bomb threats triggered evacuations. At 10:28 a.m., one such threat, a suspicious device later identified as a dummy missile, halted rescue for 45 agonizing minutes. The last survivor, a 15-year-old girl, was pulled from the wreckage around 7 p.m. Rescue came at a cost. One nurse was struck fatally by falling debris as they were helping to recover the wounded. 26 other rescuers were hospitalized during the days-long effort. More than 12,000 individuals would ultimately participate in rescue and recovery. FEMA deployed 11 urban search and rescue task forces with 665 specialists and 24 K-9 units scouring the ruins. Between April 24th and 29th, as much as 350 tons of rubble were removed daily in the search for the remains of the dead and clues to who was responsible.
We've still got our body count of 52. That's going to go up significantly today. We found pockets in the building where we have multiple fatalities. Our rescue workers are focusing in on the front of the building where we had the large collapse. Also teams in the back of the building, down in the basement area, and that's where we're finding a lot of our fatalities. We're still optimistic.
The national response was swift and overwhelming. Wheelbarrows, gloves, knee pads, helmet lights, even football helmets arrived in such numbers that new logistics centers had to be created just to handle the flood. Local restaurants served tens of thousands of meals. The Salvation Army handed out over 100,000 meals and just as many supplies. Blood banks overflowed with donations. At 9:45 a.m., Governor Frank Keating declared a state of emergency. President Clinton, informed just minutes earlier, considered grounding air traffic to trap any fleeing suspects, but decided against it. By 4 p.m., he addressed the nation, condemning the attack as an act of cowardice and calling for resilience.
The bombing in Oklahoma City was an attack on innocent children and defenseless citizens. It was an act of cowardice, and it was evil. The United States will not tolerate it, and I will not allow the people of this country to be intimidated by evil cowards.
But the grief was compounded by the stories emerging from the rubble, stories of children being recovered from the daycare center within the Murrah building. 19 were killed in total, 15 from the daycare center. News cameras gathered to capture the raw aftermath of the disaster. One photo, firefighter Chris Fields cradling dying infant Bailey Allman, became the face of the tragedy, printed across the world and winning its photographer a Pulitzer Prize. Her mother, Erin Allman Koch, later reflected on how difficult it was for her daughter to become a symbol to the world while she was trying to grieve her loss. As the days passed, recovery took precedence. Each corner of the wreckage was sifted for evidence and for any last remains. By May 5th at 12:05 a.m., the recovery phase officially ended. All but 3 victims had been located, with the final bodies being 2 credit union employees and a customer. Early media reports had mistakenly pointed the finger at foreign terrorists. Some outlets speculated the attack had links to the 1993 World Trade Center bombing. One innocent man was falsely targeted in the search for a brown man, and the Arab American community endured harassment in the days that followed. Only later did the story shift. Reporters noted the date's connection to the Waco siege and turned toward anti-government extremism. As the rescue phase ended, attention pivoted to the investigation, the arrests of Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols, and the pursuit of the elusive John Doe No. 2. The Murrah building was deemed too much of a safety hazard to leave standing. Demolition was planned for early May, but had to be delayed briefly to allow McVeigh's defense team access. Then, on May 23rd at 7:02 a.m., the last wall came down. The EMS Command Center, manned around the clock since the bombing, finally shut down. Trucks carried away 800 tons of rubble daily. Some debris was preserved for evidence, others incorporated into memorials, sent to schools, or sold to aid the victims. A fence surrounding the blast zone soon filled with poems, toys, flowers, and messages. It became a shrine, a spontaneous memorial that testified to the city's collective grief.
I remember wondering if I was dead or alive.
Well, there were ladies that were right beside me. They didn't make it out. I don't know how to explain it, I really don't.
When I was thrown on the floor, I could look up through the whole building and see clear on the north side. I could see blue sky. So I knew it was horrible. There was only 18 inches of the floor that behind me that didn't break away. So they all disappeared.
Prosecutors opened Timothy McVeigh's trial on April 24, 1997, portraying him as a man consumed by anti-government zeal, fueled by his Army service and militant readings such as the Turner diaries he carried with him the day of the attack. Led by Joseph Hartzler, they called 137 witnesses, including Michael and Lori Fortier, to attest to McVeigh's hatred of federal authority and his intent to strike back. McVeigh's defense challenged the chain of custody and floated a broader conspiracy, invoking the elusive John Doe No. 2. A severed limb was found at the site, further fueling rumors of a hidden accomplice not yet known to the court. However, the severed limb was later identified as belonging to Airman Lakesha Levy. As mentioned, the swift demolition of the Murrah building on May 23, 1995, further hindered the investigation. Still, after 23 hours of jury deliberation, McVeigh was convicted on 11 counts and sentenced to death. On June 11, 2001, he became the first federal prisoner in 38 years to be executed by lethal injection.
Timothy James McVeigh has been executed by lethal injection.
This morning, the United States of America carried out the severest sentence for the gravest of crime. The victims of the Oklahoma City bombing have been given not vengeance, but justice. And one young man met the fate he chose for himself 6 years ago.
Terry Nichols' first trial followed McVeigh's, with prosecutors painting him as McVeigh's indispensable partner rather than a mere bystander. Evidence showed Nichols acquiring bomb ingredients, robbing Robert Moore with McVeigh to fund the attack, and coordinating the getaway vehicle's placement. The defense characterized Nichols as unwitting, beholden to McVeigh's extremist fervor. Once again, the specter of John Doe No. 2 surfaced to sow doubts. After lengthy deliberations, Nichols was convicted of conspiracy and involuntary manslaughter, but spared a death sentence in federal court. A subsequent state trial held him accountable for the remaining victims, culminating in guilty verdicts on all charges. When jurors deadlocked on the death penalty, Nichols received 161 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole.
We're pleased that the system worked and that justice prevailed. But the verdict doesn't diminish the great sadness that occurred in Oklahoma City 2 years ago. Our only hope is that the verdict will go some way to preventing such a terrible, drastic crime from ever occurring again.
After testifying against McVeigh and Nichols at their trials, it was now Michael Fortier's turn on trial. Him and his wife, Lori Fortier, entered court under a storm of public ire, having known of McVeigh's plans, yet failing to alert authorities. Prosecutors highlighted their proximity to the conspirators, with Michael aiding McVeigh in scouting the Murrah building and Lori helping laminate the fake license used to rent the Ryder truck. Defense counsel portrayed Michael as coerced by McVeigh's righteous anger and Lori as little more than a bystander. Ultimately, Michael secured a plea deal and testified against McVeigh, earning a 12-year prison sentence and a substantial fine, while Lori was granted immunity for her testimony and Michael's cooperation. Michael has since been released and is currently in the Witness Protection Program. No evidence ever emerged regarding John Doe No. 2. Judges found no admissible proof of additional participants, yet rumors of unnamed accomplices persisted. In the end, these trials underscored how a single spark of extremist fervor can erupt into staggering violence. In the immediate wake of the bombing, domestic terrorism entered a new, unsettling chapter. Federal authorities noted a surge in homegrown threats, an observation echoed by organizations like the Southern Poverty Law Center, which tracked dozens of smaller-scale domestic plots from 1995 to 2005. In response, the FBI brought on an additional 500 agents to intercept such plots before they could manifest. But by the early 2000s, the national lens had shifted. Foreign terror eclipsed domestic threats, and anti-government militias faded, dropping from over 800 to barely 150. Yet the fuse that McVeigh lit never fully went out. Experts urged ID requirements for fertilizer purchases, a measure some states adopted. Chemical taggants and safer formulas like ammonium sulfate further lowered the risk of catastrophic blasts. Legally, the tragedy triggered landmark reforms. The Anti-Terrorism and Effective Death Penalty Act of 1996 streamlined federal appeals and fortified law enforcement's investigatory powers. reflecting heightened concern about right-wing extremism. A year later, the Victim Allocution Clarification Act of 1997 granted survivors and families the explicit right to witness trials and offer impact testimony. A response to the proceedings moved out of state. In subsequent years, efforts continued to restrict access to explosive materials, balancing farmers' legitimate use of ammonium nitrate with the pressing need to prevent future attacks. Where devastation once stood, memory now stands guard. The Oklahoma City National Memorial, born from hundreds of designs and years of grief, rises from the blast site. Twin bronze gates mark 9:01 and 9:03, the minute before innocence and the moment after the blast, framing a tranquil reflecting pool at the center. On the lawn, symbolic chairs, each representing a life lost, stand in quiet remembrance, sized to reflect children among the victims. A survivor tree, left charred but alive, and a segment of the chain link fence once overflowing with tributes honor the resilience that emerged from tragedy. President Clinton dedicated the memorial on April 19, 2000, 5 years to the day. Since then, hundreds of thousands have walked its grounds. Some come to mourn, others to learn, all to remember. The site endures as more than stone and silence. It is the breath of memory and the echo of resilience. Thank you so much for sticking around until the end of the video. If you found this story interesting and want to explore other historical people, places, and events, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. I'd also love to hear from you. Drop a comment below with topics you'd like us to feature in future episodes. I'm working to build a community around these videos, and your thoughts on potential topics or ways to improve the channel are more than welcome. Your support makes this channel possible, and I'm excited to keep sharing these incredible stories with you.